Hi and welcome back to my channel. My name is Sarah and today I'm back to talk about my favourite book series and some series that I'm excited to start. A couple of months ago I made a video where I was talking about all of the series I was in the middle of. In that video I was going to include my favourite series and ones I wanted to start, but then I realised I was in the middle of 28 series, which was quite a lot for one video. It ended up being very long. So I thought I would just do a separate video discussing my favourite series and then a few that I would like to start quite soon. There are a lot of series that I would like to read. I'm also quite wary of starting a lot of new series. I'd say that out of the favourite series, all of them I read in quite quick succession. I think that really is the way to get the most out of a series. You start to forget details if you leave it like years between reading books. So I don't really want to start loads and loads of new series that I have no real intention of reading the entirety of in quite soon. So I sort of limited it to I think 5, and I actually only have 5 favorite series as well. Like, I've not included ones from when I was a kid because I read a lot of books as a kid. I'm sure that some of those could be favorite series, but that almost seems like a separate thing. Like, I read all the Harry Potter books, but it was a long time ago. Same with I read all of a series of Unfortunate Events. But I don't really feel like I can comment on those now. So these are all just more recent series that I've read. I thought there were going to be loads more, but in this I've only included series that I have finished the entirety of. Like, there are some series that I imagine will join this list when I finish them, but I don't really feel like I can count them as a favourite series until I finish them. There is one series that I've included here that's not finished, but that's just because the author has not finished writing the series. So I feel like I can include that because I've read the 2 books that have come out so far and really enjoyed them, so I feel like that's fair. I'm probably going to go least favourite to favourite, but as I say, I do really love all of these. Would highly recommend. So the first one is The Idiot by Elif Batuman. I read this book when it first came out in 2018, and I remember reading this when I was travelling. I went to South America for 3 months, and I remember reading this in a bus and really enjoying it. It was an 18-hour bus journey. And at the time, I didn't realise that there was going to be a sequel to this. So the second book is called Either Or. The Idiot follows the first year of our character at university, and then Either Or follows the second year. I think that there's at least going to be another 1, maybe 2. I don't know how many years there are at university in America. I know in Scotland there are 4, but then in England there are 3, so I'm not sure. But yeah, I really, really love this book. It's quite unlike any other book I've ever read. It's quite nerdy. It really goes into all of the classes that she's taking. So she takes lots of random classes and it goes into quite a lot of depth about what she's studying. She also takes beginner's Russian, and in this class she meets an older, I think he's maybe a postgraduate student, and she really falls for him. This book is set in the 90s and they start to have these quite long email exchanges. He's sort of messing her about, and she kind of realises it, but she kind of wants to feel like she's above it all, she doesn't care, but she evidently does care. It sort of goes from there. She then spends the summer volunteering in Hungary. The student's Hungarian, so it's almost like she follows him for the summer. This one is just it's just very, very enjoyable. The same with the second book. As I say, it follows her second year. She's definitely matured a little bit. It does feel like a character development in the second book, but it's also still more of the same, just mundane details about university life. But I think if you like campus novels, you'll really enjoy both of these. I actually reread this one before reading the second one, and I really enjoyed my reread of it as well, and that was only maybe last year or the year before. I think this one really stands up. I think if you're looking for a book with a very tight plot, this is not it. It's definitely more slice of life. You're getting a lot of information about just her thoughts and feelings at university. I think at the time when I read this, I was still at university, so it really appealed to me then. As I say, I did reread it and really enjoyed it, but maybe if you're very far from sort of university age, you might find it a little bit annoying. She does seem quite immature, she is only 17, 18, and she does make a lot of stupid decisions, but she thinks that she's like justified in everything she's doing, so I can see how it maybe would irritate some people, but I think she's a very, very likable character, and yeah, just thoroughly enjoyed this. Then next, probably no huge surprise to anyone, just because it's a very popular series, is the Neapolitan Quartet by Elena Ferrante. So this one's My Brilliant Friend. Yeah, I mean, I really like Elena Ferrante. I especially her Neapolitan Quartet. I've read a couple of her other works. I read Lying Life of Adults and quite enjoyed it, and I read The Days of Abandonment. And like I did enjoy it, but I found it quite a tricky read, that one. But yeah, I would say that by far my favourites of her works are the Neapolitan Quartet, especially the first book actually. So obviously this book has recently been voted #1 on the like New York Times 100 best books of the 21st century, and I've seen a lot of people being like, how can this possibly be the best book of the 21st century? I was like, kind of agree with that, just because this is a very quiet book and it is the start of something bigger, so it almost seems unfair it being #1 when you really do sort of need to read the rest of the series to like get the full extent of what Ferrante's doing. So I think including the first book on that sort of list is sort of quite unfair. But yeah, also this book is very quiet. Like the rest of the series definitely gets more action-packed and exciting, but the first book is very much following these two girls that are childhood friends, frenemies type thing, and their desire to sort of reach further education, and just the choices they make in their lives. But the first book really just follows them up until the age of about 16, so it very much is their childhood. In post-war Naples, they were both from quite poor families. It's about all of the other kids in the neighbourhood, and you follow them throughout their lives as they start to grow up. I'm not going to go into too much detail about this because obviously a lot of people have read this. It's a very, very popular series, but I definitely would highly recommend, if you like a slower paced book, I would say that, like, especially the first one, it is, you know, it does take its time. It's not in a rush to go anywhere, and it's not always pleasant. Like I think that Elena Ferrante captures that sort of female friendship at a young age incredibly well, like where you're friends but you're also still like in competition with each other. You both want to be the smartest. Like on the surface you're being really nice to each other, but underneath there's like a little like glimmer of malice. I think she does that really, really well. And that sort of continues throughout the 4 books. But yeah, I would say that like definitely the first one or maybe the second one are my favourites. Just because they are slower paced. It's definitely, yeah, if you're interested in Italy, like post World War II, all the way up to, I guess it maybe goes up to about 2000. Yeah, I would highly recommend this. You definitely get a sense of the politics of the time, society, and as Elena sort of goes throughout the book, she does become more privileged. You sort of see a different side to her life, compared with life back in the sort of part of Naples where she's from. So yeah, highly recommend this one. The next one almost seems like a cheat because it's only the one book that I have, but it is often published in 3 books. I just bought like the whole series bound up, so I'm gonna count it. And that's Childhood Youth Dependency by Tove Ditlevsen. So yeah, this is quite often published. Like you can buy Childhood, you can buy Youth, you can buy Dependency, but like as you can see, it's not a massive book, so those ones must be really, really tiny. And this one cost £10, so I wasn't going to spend like £10 on them all individually when I could just buy them all in the one. So this is like a memoir of Tove Ditlevsen's childhood, youth, and then it goes on to talk about her sort of married life, her life with kids, and sort of some of the substance abuse issues she has, which is kind of not, when I started it, I thought Dependency was talking about marriage, that like she was dependent on someone else, but no, it's very much like drug dependency. Yeah, and this is also called the Copenhagen Trilogy, and yeah, it takes place in Copenhagen throughout. I really like Tove Ditlevsen's writing style in this. Is very sort of simplistic in a way, but she really manages to get across a lot of her angers and frustrations while still like reflecting on the positive parts of her childhood and youth. It seems like quite a balanced picture. I heard someone say that it just felt like she was like moaning for 300 pages, but I didn't really get that at all. So when she's young, she dreams of being a writer. So there's quite a lot about that. She then, when she grows up, starts to work in an optician's, sort of as a receptionist, I think. This is also probably quite slow paced. It sort of just follows like what she's doing and a lot of her reflections on how being a woman has like put her in this position. But I really didn't find it like moany at all. I think she paints quite a balanced portrait. Also for its time, this was written in the 70s, but she very much goes into a lot of like details about sexual encounters that she has. She doesn't try and paint herself as like a very nice person. It seems quite brutally honest, especially towards the latter part of the book. Like she doesn't seem to be a particularly good mother or enjoy that role. But she's not really trying to make excuses. I just think if you're looking for a book that is quite like a detailed description of someone's life growing up at quite a different time. She was born in 1917, so it's very much like pre-World War II Copenhagen, going into post-World War II Copenhagen. So yeah, I would really highly recommend this one as well. Obviously it's one of my favourite series, but I think that this is like got to be up there and like with my top 10 favourite books of all time probably. I just think it's like a really powerful memoir. Again, when I read it, I was like really captivated by it. Okay, next is again a very, very popular series. One that I really didn't think I was going to like. I'd heard, there's a lot of controversy about this series, and that's the My Struggle series by Knausgaard. So obviously, if you know anything about this, Knausgaard is sort of like, he's very much described as the father of autofiction. Whether that is true or not is like remains to be seen. I think a lot of people have been doing autofiction for a very long time. He's managed to package it in a way that seems new. So this is a 6-volume series that basically follows his life, not in a linear fashion. The first book talks about his father, really. And then the second book about his marriage. Then the third book goes back to his childhood. The fourth book is about him like spending a year in the very north of Norway in a sort of school as a teacher. And then the fifth book is about his first marriage. And then the last book I didn't like so much. It's like more about his kids and his wife, and also a 500-page Hitler biography. So I still like enjoyed the last book, but less so. But overall, I just think this series is incredible. So why this is controversial is, well, for one, when Knausgaard, you sort of get into this as the series progresses, but when Knausgaard wrote this first book, he sent it to all of the people that he talks about in the book, and his uncle came back and said, like, well, I don't agree with a lot of the things that you've said about, he talks about his dad in it, which is his uncle's brother, and he's like, I don't agree with this. You've painted him out to be a very bad person. He did none of this. And Knausgaard's like, well, that's how I saw it. His father is like, he's dead now, so he can't really defend himself. So Knausgaard made the compromise to not mention his father by name in this book. However, obviously, like, it's his dad, so everybody knows who he is. So I guess that's always going to be tricky when you're talking about people in a way that is not particularly positive. Like, you are sort of slandering them, and you can say, well, it's fiction, but it's very clearly not fiction. The same with his wife. She's also a writer. She was fine with him writing whatever he was going to write, but she doesn't come across particularly well in the books either. Yeah, I suppose it's like, at what cost can you just write whatever you want? And he has had backlash from this. At the same time, I think that what you get here is not a positive picture of Knausgaard. Like, he is a very flawed person. You see that throughout, and he's not particularly likable throughout most of the book, but this series is so compulsively readable, considering like nothing happens. Like, it's very, very slow. So the way that he writes, like, you'll get like an initial scene. So it'll be like, for example, in the second book, he's taking his kids to nursery and then he goes to a cafe to read a book. And you sort of get that, and that takes like 300 pages for him to get through. But then in between that, you sort of get little memories that like remind him of things as he goes. But yeah, to complete a whole scene or like a whole day in his life, it often takes him like upwards of 300 pages. So be prepared for that. But you know, his writing is so incredibly readable. I would basically read anything he writes. Like I just think that he has such a way of like making things interesting, but like, you know, the writing's not particularly beautiful in this. It's definitely not a book that you would be like underlining things particularly. So yeah, I just find it quite incredible how he managed to do this. But yeah, I think the series as a whole comes in at about 3,000, 4,000 pages. This is the first book. It's definitely one of the smaller books. It's just under 500 pages. The last book is 1,200 pages, so like if you're going to commit to this is a big commitment, but like I think it's definitely worth it. I can understand, you know, maybe you don't want to read a sort of book from like a white male perspective for 3,000 pages. I think this is like, you know, a very male point of view. I'm okay with that, like that doesn't bother me, but like if you prefer reading from a women's point of view, then definitely don't pick this up. Like I don't think that he talks about women particularly badly in it, but you know, he is sort of going through his teenage years, so there is a lot of like fantasizing about women, so just like be prepared for that. But like I think it seems like quite a realistic portrayal of a man's life in that sense. Like I don't, it doesn't seem anything too wild in it. So yeah, highly recommend this one. But yeah, quite a large commitment. I know that he has a new series out that I have not actually read. So the first one's The Morning Star. I think it's going to be like a 5-book series, but it's definitely just a novel. So like I would like to pick it up, but I'm just like, I want to commit to another massive series. I'm not sure. He's also written a lot of other books. I know that he's written a sort of seasonal quartet where he's like talking about a year in his life, I think, which I would like to read. But again, I think like after finishing the series this year, I need a little bit of a break. And then the last, and probably my favourite series, I would say, is, I don't actually know if this series has a name, but the first book is Nervous Conditions by Tsitsi Dangarembga. The second book is called The Book of Naught, and then the third book is called This Mournable Body. I really, really love these books. Like, these are incredible. So Nervous Conditions first came out in the 90s, and then This Mournable Body, the last book, came out, I want to say like 6 years ago, maybe. Anyway, it was shortlisted for the Booker Prize, the last book, when it came out. It didn't win. But yeah, Nervous Conditions is about Tambu. She is growing up in, well, what is Rhodesia at the time, but what is nowadays Zimbabwe. And it's sort of following her childhood, the first book. She grows up in a family that's not particularly wealthy, but she has an uncle who works for a mission school, who is going to take her brother there to educate him. However, her brother dies. This is like right at the start of the book. The book opens by like, my brother died. So he ends up taking her instead. So she ends up leaving home and going to this sort of whole new world type thing. It's you know, it's still very much an African mission school. It's not for like the sort of European colonial children. It is just for African children, and she does very, very well in this. To the point that in the second book she progresses and she does go to this sort of Catholic nun school. I don't know what it's called, where most of the students are white, and she starts to feel a bit left out. I think what this book does incredibly well is it's very compulsive and readable, but at the same time it's very layered and is very much critiquing the colonial system in Zimbabwe, and just the bigger things. So like, you know, there's a lot of violence in the background of these books, but also the sort of microaggressions, the ways that Tambu starts to feel left out in certain situations, how she copes with this. She's not always like, sometimes you want to just give her a shake, because yes, like she has a lot of discrimination in some areas of her life, but she doesn't deal with it particularly well. And I think that is like very realistic, because I feel like often when you read these sort of books that are critiquing colonialism, they make the sort of poor subjugated character like a very innocent, likable character. Tambu's not that. Like, it's not that she's not innocent, but she's not a particularly sociable person. She definitely like goes into herself when things go wrong, which is like a very realistic portrayal, and I really love this book for that. I think that the three books progress really well. Like, the third book feels like a continuation of this while still being something almost bigger and becomes more complicated. So yeah, I would highly recommend all three of these. Like, if I had to pick I don't even think I can pick a favourite. I just think they were all so great. I actually went to see Tsitsi Dangarembga give a talk at Edinburgh Book Festival 2 years ago, and she signed this book, I think. Yes. And it was a really interesting talk as well. She was talking about the non-fiction book she had released called Black and Female, I think, which I also read and enjoyed. She was speaking with a few other people about sort of how we talk about Africa in the West, the misconceptions that people have, how we should be changing our language. It was actually like a very interesting talk, but quite sad. Some of the things that still seem necessary to hammer home to people, that like Africa's not a country. Like, of course Africa's not a country. But then one of the women in the talk, like at the end, after they had gone through all of the reasons how all of the African countries are so different and it's impossible to group them all together, at the very, very end of the talk, a woman put up her hand and was like, so there are like 50 countries in Africa and there are 50 states in America, so why don't you just make Africa one big country? I was like, what? I've just been through all of this. But it was really interesting to hear her speak. And yeah, I would really, really like, if you're going to pick up any of these books, I think that this series is the one I would like push into most people's hands if I could. So then, yeah, I think I have 5 series I would like to start. 3 of them I own the first book of. So that's great. The first one is the Forsyte Saga by John Galsworthy. This is volume 1. I did not realise that volume 1 was so big. So this, I think, follows a family throughout 50 years. It says, the Forsyte Saga traces the changing fortunes of the wealthy Forsyte dynasty through 50 years of material triumph and emotional disaster. So this is the first volume, and it begins as the 19th century is drawing to a close and the upper middle classes with their property and propriety are becoming a dying section of society. So I'm really hoping this is like a very exciting family drama where they're starting to lose money and everyone's freaking out. I've not really heard anyone speak about this, but yeah, the first book is almost 900 pages. So that's great. I don't actually know how many other volumes are in it. Give me 1 second. Seems like there are 3 volumes in this, and each volume is broken into 3 parts. So yeah, I'm gonna like read this one, see how I go. I have had this for maybe about 6 months now. I ordered it online, didn't realise how big it was going to be, and then as soon as it arrived I was like, oh no. But I do really want to read it, so I will get to it. The next one is like sort of just one book, but I bought it smartly in multiple volumes because I knew that this book is huge, and that's Kristin Lavransdatter by Sigrid Undset. Yeah, I think this book is quite often published as just a one book, but it's like 1200 pages, and I was like, I'm not going to read a 1200 page book, or at least I'm not going to read it soon because I just procrastinate the long books. So when I saw that you could buy it in 3 separate volumes, I was like, great. But this volume seems quite short. This is only 274 pages, so I'm a bit worried about how big the other 2 volumes are going to be when I get to them. I also ordered this one online secondhand, and like, I don't really think you can see, but the edge of it is like someone's spray painted it green. It's a bit weird. This is like a very classic book that's on all of the like best books to read lists. This follows the story of a woman's life in 14th century Norway, and so this first bit is called the Bridal Wreath, so I'm assuming it's going to be about her young life until she's married. I have not really read anything set in this time period, so I have no idea how I'm going to go on with it. Sigrid Undset is a Norwegian author, so obviously she's not from the 14th century. This was written in 1927. But I'm assuming she's done a lot of research, and yeah, this is a classic that's been on my radar for quite a long time, and yeah, I'm excited to get to it. The other book that's in the other room, the can't be bothered to go and get, is the first book of the Alexandria Quartet by Durrell. The first book is Justine, and I think they're sort of like four. It's called a quartet, so I guess it is a series, but I don't know how connected the books are. I think they all sort of follow different love affairs in pre-World War II Alexandria. I really like the idea of that setting. And yeah, I'm reading this one now, like I've just started it, so I'm very excited to see how it goes. Two more that I don't own that I would like to read. The first one is the Outline series by Rachel Cusk. I have read a few Rachel Cusks now. I'm currently reading Arlington Park. I'm really enjoying it. And next I would definitely like to try and get to the Outline Trilogy. So it's three books, obviously. Outline, something else, and Transit, I think. Don't really know too much about them. I think it's sort of about a woman overhearing conversations. I could be wrong. I'm really enjoying Rachel Cusk at the moment as an author. I think that everything I've read by her has felt quite different, but interesting. So I'm excited to continue my journey. And then the last series is one that I have no idea if I'm going to like. I really want to read the Book of the New Sun. I think it's a quartet by Wolfe. This is a very classic sci-fi fantasy book, which is why I'm not sure if I'm going to like it, because I don't really read a lot of sci-fi or fantasy. But Jess over at Sunbeams Jess has started this series, so I think that you sort of buy them two books in the one. So the first one is Shadow and Claw. I need to check this. I'll write all of the correct names in the description. It just sounds really interesting. I think it's sort of set in another world, quite political, intriguey. I would really like to give it a go and just see how I got on with it. So those are five book series that I've really enjoyed, and 5 book series that I really hope to start soon. So yeah, if you've read any of these and enjoyed them or not enjoyed them, please let me know. And yeah, I will be back soon for another video.